To match this dragon, I would transform myself into an equally as large creature. I'm uncertain as to what I became, but it seemed formidable enough. Again, the real awareness, providing you with everything you require in every new moment, everything you need for whatever you are facing or dealing with is always available. Life is always there in its completeness, and so it follows that a connection with that has everything we could need at our fingertips. It just needs to be recognized, and we do so from being in the now, the new nowness of the is, a position that is aside from the limited, created consciousness and the personal self. And so I had the tools for the task, and would engage the dragon, and battle ensued. Interestingly, the dragon never seemed at all distressed, or even aggressive, as we thought. It was as though it knew its time was up, and had a kind of acceptance of this. It would fight, yes, but almost as an automatic response of the personal self to having its construction being attacked, almost like an automatic reflex. For the personal self is very routine and habitual. It is simply a programmed mechanic for housing experience references and producing experiences through what the real you decides through its personal awareness. Many of the tapline agreements and attachments may even be of little interest to the personal self, were it really to address its habitual activities. It just does what it is comfortable with, what it is used to, on automatic, droned-out pilot, but nevertheless an unease when its patterns of decided behaviour are threatened, and so the personal self may well defend agreements and attachments that really, on the face of it, are boring even to itself, but that provide a comforting familiarity that it would seek to cling onto regardless. For much of the personal self must be boring, or it wouldn't seek to attempt the process of becoming more aware in the first place. Regardless of its success or failure in this endeavour, it must have exhausted enough of the creational simulator's experience, potential, and possibility for it to seek, to want, to at least try and see beyond what it has always known, to seek something that the restricting and limiting simulator can no longer provide. And so, this dragon was battling, but with very little zest, enthusiasm, or urgency, almost resigned to its fate, just an automatic reflex to the defence of an agreement or attachment that cushioned it in the comfort of familiarity. For the process of becoming more aware must have an understanding, a united front, a mutual agreement between the personal self and the real self, or they forever will be locking horns with each other, and the struggle could go on for eternity. As long as we are in creation and have our created personal selves, we are effectively two people, and an awareness divided between the personal and the real you. The personal self can't be destroyed, as the unslayable monsters on the real side reveal, but certainly a compromise must be reached, and perhaps this dragon, with its calm countenance and almost disinterest, even as it was defeated, demonstrated a greater acceptance of the personal self for the task of its recognition, for you don't lose anything, even as you reach a point where you have no further requirement for a personal self that has served its purpose, that being to recognize the true reality and the real awareness through. For everything is awareness, and everything is, and in that isness is everything. Then how can it be that you lose anything? You must go into the unknown and take the risk to let go of the personal self, which is quite the task, and a huge decision, and it may seem to the personal self as though you are losing everything as you step into an invisible unknown. But the isness is everything. It's just a consideration that the personal self surely has the hardest time to grasp, as it lacks the tools to understand this concept, and no amount of thinking, feeling, or even imagination would allow it to perceive the true reality. The true reality is a reality all of its own, and aside from the simulators and the personal selves within them, that requires a recognition that the personal self simply can't understand. But then, it was never designed as anything other than a storehouse of reference experiences, and a generator of experiences based on what is decided through a cause and effect. To get beyond the restriction of the simulator requires the decision to release all agreements and attachments that bind us to it, to be aware of them, that we no longer are unconscious of what restricts us. And as we choose to go through this process, we must be very conscious of the value of all experiences. As the initial scene demonstrated, an experience my personal self considered to be a dull classroom setting, for it was only when I decided to remain in the classroom that the further scenes would unfold and culminate in the slaying of a tapline agreement dragon. Life is always on, and always demonstrating to us, because we're all in the same life, and a part of it, and it falls on us to pay attention to everything in our ongoing experience, on the physical and on the real side. In addition, there was one final scene that I feel demonstrated what I mentioned earlier about how it is a step-by-step process, and if we skip our lessons, if we walk out of the real side classrooms, we may end up in a situation we haven't the training or preparation to deal with. My impression was that this scene was a validation of this very idea. The scene slotted in, but was not part of what I have just recounted, other than being almost like an alternative event that occurred and ran simultaneously at one point during the real side experience scenes I had just recounted. I was in a situation where I had to combat other individuals. They presented as very formidable adversaries. However, I felt convinced of my ability to deal with them, and would walk toward what seemed to be a combat arena. But before combat could even begin, the very ground began to bulge and tremble, to break apart and fragment. It was as though an earthquake had beset this place. Great chunks of the floor fell away into angry-looking, lava-filled depths below. And so, this would make anything other than trying to survive tumbling into the fiery chasms an impossibility. A verification, I would suggest, of my walking into a situation without the adequate training and the awareness required for the task of skipping the classroom and assuming I could still make the grade. For the demonstration was clearly that of shaky foundations, tumultuous ground underfoot, an instability that would make my successful combating of these individuals impossible. In other words, trying to skip the stages of the process of awareness and thinking everything will be fine, not taking the required time to recognize what was being presented as each stage requires, and learning my lessons, and finding myself then on shaky foundations, and more likely to fall back, to fall into the chasm which demonstrated very clearly as creational physical, and be absorbed back into the personal self. Just as well, this was only an alternative glimpse of what may have happened had I skipped my lessons in the classroom from the earlier experience. For this time I had remained in the classroom, and there will surely be greater tests and tribulations ahead, as the guides continuously prepare us on the real side, if we continue to pay attention.